What's going on YouTube? Welcome to another video, and I'm going to break down my pre-spawn into spawn fishing baits for the Midwest. You know, kind of what I would fish from the kayak as we enter that spawn phase, where the weather starts to warm up and fish are starting to move from the deep into the warm water, into the shallows. So I've got kind of like a comprehensive list of what I've always used, and there's going to be a lot of carryover with seasons. It's really going to be about, you know, kind of confidence or whatever, but starting off, number one on the list is probably going to be a lipless crankbait. And, you know, a lot of people may say, hey, why can't I just throw like a normal crankbait? And I've got another example here of just a, you know, a shallow diving crankbait that you could use. But the lipless is useful because it can sink to multiple depths and then you can retrieve it in the way that you would. So you're not limited by the lip to the depth. You can, you know, yo-yo technique this. You can let it sink, raise it up, raise it back down. You could lock it to a certain you know, water depth. So if you've got your fish finder and, you know, you can kind of see where it tapers off, you can throw it to that depth, retrieve it in, or just use it to cover water and find active fish. And some of the best colors to use, basically anything they can see. So I don't have a red lipless crank because it's actually on my kayak in my Ecolight black pack, but something similar to this, something that really stands out and is irritating to the fish on beds, is something super useful. So red, crawfish, shad patterns, which this is here. So kind of look at the forage and the bait fish in your, you know, local fishery. You know, sometimes those bait fish will try to eat the fish eggs and the males will sit on the nest and protect them. So super easy to use. And then once again, just a yo-yo retrieve technique is generally what I use if that straight retrieve isn't working. And you can also, you know, run them over submerged vegetation. I would be wary of wood and stuff like that with these lipless cranks. They don't have the lip that normal crankbaits have that kind of allow them to bounce off stuff. So just be cognizant of that. Okay, and the next one on our list is going to be a suspending jerkbait. So, you know, in the winter months, you probably were using a suspended jerkbait when you found, you know, the fish were in the deeper water if you happen to fish during that time. And it just allows that nice twitch action of a bait fish where the target kind of sits there in suspense, assuming you have a good one. So I've got a Megabass 110 here and then just like a generic, not even sure what brand this is, but just another jerkbait with a nice shad pattern. I tend to find the sexy shad looks pretty well. Anything, again, that matches your fishery. And like I said, good for bass when they're sluggish. So when they're in that transition period between coming in from the deep and feeding and spawning, depending on, you know, that time frame, it's just a good all-around bait to at least have tied on with something. And, you know, best colors, shad, white, translucent patterns. Like I said, anything that matches the fishery. And the long pauses, you know, you can twitch them and they'll kind of sit there and the fish will be able to take a look at them. You know, you can make that a little bit more aggressive or whatever once you've kind of nailed down that area. And that's kind of how it fits in with the lipless crankbait, is once you find those fish, then you can really dial it in there with the jerkbaits. Okay, next on the list, we've got just the overall jig category. So I've got a swim jig here and I've got a Chatterbait Evo Elite, which I think is a really good bait overall. You don't have to buy the jackhammer. It's got that same attachment style, so it starts chattering right as you enter the water. Just overall, you know, a jig is always good to have when the water is still cold, and you can really get it in front of those fish and allow it to sit on the bottom. And I'm using black and blue for both just because the water I fish is generally stained or murky. But obviously, as you get clear water, you want to go a little bit more natural. But overall, you know, your chatterbait is going to be a nice search bait in addition to the crankbait or the lipless. That chatter is really going to get the fish's attention, churn up the water, send out the vibration. And, you know, once you cover the water you're in and you dial in, you can attack with the jig here. And I only have the swim jig here just because sometimes the vegetation tends to grow early, but you can just use any sort of other jig in the area, a football jig if there's rocks, something with a weed guard, especially if you're going into the wood or wooded areas. Next up on the list is going to be a bait you're probably always going to have tied on at any point in time during the season, and it's going to be a spinnerbait. I just happen to have a Booyah spinnerbait here that I pulled out, which is pretty solid. It's a double willow, chartreuse color, chartreuse and white, depending again on your fishery. You know, if you're in the dark stained muddy water like I am, you want as much flash as possible. So, you know, you may want to consider that, and just colors that kind of stick out. You could also do the same thing with like a black and blue to, you know, offset that silhouettes to attract the fish. But anything that, again, covers water, allows you to find fish, reactionary style baits. Spinner baits are really good at just mimicking bait fish swimming around, so they should want to strike that. And you know, overall, you can do a lot with it. You can add a trailer to it if you wanted to. Any like a a Kitech or like a grub or whatever to get some extra action. You could also use Colorado blades or a combination of both if you wanted to. It really just depends on your fishery. A Colorado blade may be able to create a little bit more vibration in the water, which will, you know, just help generate and attract more fish. This is going to be our Texas rig creature baits or craws. So I like a creature bait. I really like the bulkiness of it. You can see here, this is a Zoom brush hog. And there's various sizes you can get. You can get the big old ones. You can get the smaller ones. And I've got a June bug color here and then a watermelon candy. So basically, you know, again, depending on your fishery, kind of what you're looking for, you know, this June bug is really good for, you know, silhouetted. It's kind of like a midnight color where it will offset, but it's also got these appendages that you can separate if you want to, just to get more vibration and movement. But also it kind of emulates really like a lizard, something that the fish usually aren't used to seeing. And if you throw something like this into their nest, they're definitely going to attack it. It's something that they're assuming is going to try to eat the eggs. So the males will likely attack it. And it's just a good bulky bait. You can see all these appendages here. It will surely get the fish's attention. Great for flipping and pitching near cover. So you can Texas rig this to make it weedless. You know, once this gets all torn up or whatever, you can actually, you know, you can use the bottom or pieces of it to, you know, as a jig trailer, or maybe like a Ned rig up top here, just to kind of, you know, utilize all that. So there's a lot of function that you can use in these. A lot of people tend to recommend the green pumpkin, they recommend the green pumpkin, black and blue, or watermelon red. You know, pretty standard colors. Again, emphasis on your water clarity. If it's like a gin color versus like a chocolatey milk, you may want to reconsider something else. You may want to make sure that you're, you know, casting specifically to cover, that the fish are there in order to get a response. And, you know, like technique wise, like I said, throw it on a jig, Texas rig it, let it drag on the bottom, hop it, get it all up in their face, and you should have a bite. So last but not least on our list is a swim bait. You know, there's guys that like glide baits or just anything that's got a big profile. I just like the, you know, the plastic swim baits that you can just kind of Texas rig. So if you've already got, you know, that baby brush hog on, maybe you want to cover some water, you can add, you know, one of these and just Texas rig it, and then you've got the nice tail action there. So I'm a big fan of Z-Man. I just feel like their baits are a lot more durable than others, so I tend to buy them. And this is the diesel minnow called the Deal, which, you know, is a pretty popular color. And then I've got a pearl here. So the pearl I'll use obviously when, you know, the water is murky or whatever, and I'm trying to get them to notice it in those type of conditions. And they both pretty well emulate, you know, bait fish in my local area, so make sure that's important. And you can slow roll them, shallow, deep, wherever you want. I mean, you could put a jig head on them and jig them on the bottom. It just depends on how best the fish are going to respond to it. You can burn these if you want. It's got the tail to initiate that reaction strike, and you can slow them down and just kind of have them peck at the nests and everything around the fish, and it should agitate them, and it's a good size too. So a lot of these are basically just you know, options that you can use. They all kind of accomplish the same task. It just depends on like what you've got in your tackle box. So basically you just want to make sure that you're covering your bases and you've got everything there. So essentially these are all the bases, you know, that I've got covered. These are all the baits that I'm going to use. So if you want, you know, any other updates on specific techniques for them, I try to fish them when I'm out on the boat and everything, but, you know, fish don't always cooperate. So it's kind of hit or miss, and you kind of just figure out what works and what doesn't. And a lot of the same stuff does. Like I mentioned before with the spinnerbait, you know, it's kind of hard to not get a bite on the spinnerbait or even the chatterbait, and I'll switch between these a lot too. Just anything that's moving and then I can add. I mean, you could add a diesel minnow to the back of one of these if you wanted to, or something smaller to get additional reaction and stuff like that. So it really just is about, you know, your preferred method of that. So, you know, figure out what you like to fish, how you've got your rod set up, and just kind of go from there.
Thanks for watching the latest video. If you want to help support the channel, I actually own my own wet shaving and grooming e-commerce website where everything's handmade by me. It's www.apexsoaps.com, and you can get a 10% off code using wet shaver. We've got some cool scents here. We've got some Coca-Cola scents, a horchata scent, traditional barbershop, just some really cool stuff. And you can purchase samples or you can buy the whole set. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out via email. Be quick to respond. Thanks for watching.